In 1949, Communist China invaded and occupied a big area in the east. In this situation of crisis, the 15-year-old Tenzin Gyatso was enthroned as the ruler of Tibet. But in 1951, China declared Tibet as part of China. A huge Chinese army marched into capital Lhasa. The number of Chinese soldiers were too big for the Tibetans to feed. Shortage of food, confiscation of crops, and arrest of many senior lamas made it worse. In March 1959, the Chinese army tried to arrest the Dalai Lama and even fired cannon bombs on his palace. Sensing danger to his life, it was decided to move Dalai Lama to India. It was a very risky job. Before reaching India on 30th March 1959, Dalai Lama had to walk for 17 days through difficult mountains, snow, high passes, and storms. According to the United Nations proceedings, China killed more than 80,000 Tibetans when Dalai Lama was secretly walking towards India. Since then, he is working for the cause of Tibet and freedom of Tibetan people. His deep faith in non-violence has won him millions of admirers across the world. In 1989, when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his message of compassion and universal responsibility, he declared, "Even my enemy deserves my compassion." It was like awarding Nobel Peace Prize to Lord Buddha himself.
Hello, good morning in Washington, D.C. and good evening in New Delhi and Dharamsala. I'm Vijay Kranti, and today we are on a common platform of the Center for Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement and Tibetan Youth Congress, and we are talking today about the significance of the Dalai Lama for future of Tibet and China's claims over the next incarnation. And today we have two great speakers. We have with us Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche, who has been the former Prime Minister of Tibet, the Kalon Tripa. And we have Mr. Robert DESTRO, who has been the United States the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, and he has been also the United States Special Coordinator for Tibetan issues. And he's the person who played a very big role in passing the Tibet Policy and Support Act and making it a law in United States. So I will not take too long time in coming between our audience and our speakers, just to give a short introduction to our speakers. And then I will leave the floor to the speakers. Mr. Robert DESTRO, a very well-known legal luminary and an academician and a very senior government official from the United States of America. He has been the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, and also holding a very important position, United States Special Coordinator for Tibetan issues. And one of the highest points, as I was just mentioning, in his period was that the Tibet Policy and Support Act was passed by the United States Congress, and it became a law. He is a very well-known civil rights attorney, a professor of law, and he has been a professor at the Catholic University and has been dean there. So he has been known for many legal outstanding contributions in the field of peace, human rights, and civil rights. especially one is very specially mentionable, that he worked 15 years with the Peace Research Institute of Oslo to establish dialogue between Muslims, Christians, and Jewish leaders in the United States and the Middle East. So we'll have a great privilege of listening to him, because our audience is very keen to know about when America brings out TPSA 2020, what does it mean, and what is the significance for the future of the institution of Dalai Lama. And our second speaker is Professor, His Eminence, Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche. He's an incarnate Lama, a Bodhisattva. I would say a true Bodhisattva in the modern times. He is the fifth SAMDHONG Rinpoche in his series, who was educated at the great Drepung Monastery of Tibet. He is one of the best known scholars on Buddhist philosophy and one of the most famous and loved academicians across India. That's something very unique about him, that in India, he is one of perhaps the only one academician of foreign origin who has received so much respect from all across the Indian academic society. You know, he has been the president of the Association of Indian Universities. He started as a very ordinary teacher immediately after 1959, when he came to India. In 1961, he was a teacher at Shimla Tibetan religious school, and then he went to Dalhousie as the principal of the school. Then he became the director of one of the most famous institutions of India, the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies in Sarnath, near Varanasi. And then he became the vice chancellor, the chancellor of in Sanchi, the Buddhist university. And one thing great about him is that he became the president of the Association of Indian University. He has worked with many great scholars. Of course, he's one who is in the closest touch with His Holiness Dalai Lama. He has worked with great scholars like J. Krishnamurti. There are so many. So we are very privileged to have these two wonderful speakers. So I will not take time from their time. So I'll request His Eminence Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche to kindly enlighten us on this subject. Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche.
Dear friends, the organizers of this webinar, and the co-speakers and all the audience, I can't say good morning or evening because there are a lot of different times. So I just say my warm greetings to everyone. Few weeks ago, I received a telephone call and also email from my long-time friend, close friend, Vijay Karanti, and he tells me this proposal of a webinar on the significance of the Dalai Lama for the future of Tibet. So at that time, I was very much hesitant to participate because of three reasons. The first reason is the language. The medium of the webinar is English, a language which I do not have a command or access. So I'm not able to express myself accurately or fully in this language. And secondly, the subject is very vast. And at that time, he was talking about the contribution of the present Dalai Lama, and then the question of reincarnation. These 3 points are very far-reaching subject, and it is really difficult to deal in a 1.5 hours time. And thirdly, a limitation of my knowledge, and particularly in advanced age and after retirement, many years of retirement from active life. So I almost forgot the current situation and also even the past history. With these limitations, I was very much hesitated. In spite of that, Vijay Karanti insisted that I must speak. So I have to yield to his insistence. So therefore, I'm here. So the question he put before me was, what has been the significance of the institution of Dalai Lama for Tibet in the past? And second is, how would you present the major contribution of present the 14th Dalai Lama in ongoing national crisis of Tibet, especially since China occupied Tibet in 1951. And the third point is that China is making claims that the entire process and authority for identifying and installing the next Dalai Lama belongs to exclusively of the Communist region of China. As a senior citizen of Tibet tradition and culture, how I evaluate all these points. So in a short spell of time, to deal with these major points is a rather difficult task for me. In spite of that, I will try to present my opinion on these issues. The institution of Dalai Lama, as we call it, 14th Dalai Lama. The first Dalai Lama was in the 15th century, contemporary with the Tsongkhapa. The Gendun troop was direct disciple of Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelugpa sect. And he was a great scholar, author of many treatises, and he established the great monastery in the Tsang, the Trashil Hempo. And the second, also great Lama, worked in Japon monastery and also established a new monastery in Chengkurjel. And the third was Gedun Jaso, and he visited to Mongolia, and he was one of the persons to make a relationship between Mongolians and Tibetans, and he was offered the title of Dalai Lama, Ocean of Wisdom, by the Mongolians, and since then the institution became Dalai Lama. Until the 5th Dalai Lama, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th were great scholars and religious leaders, spiritual master, and which have so many disciples, followers, and taught many great treatises. And since the 5th Dalai Lama, he became the ruler of Tibet and the leader of spirituality as well as the political. One of the Mongolian warriors, the Kuzhtenzin Chuje, who conquered Tibet. Tibet was in small parts. After 9th century, the kingdom of Tibet was divided into many small principalities, and he conquered all of this and united the all 3 regions of Tibet and requested the 5th Dalai Lama to become the political leader. And it was 1642. Since then, the legitimate government, sovereign government of Tibet was established. And from the 5th Dalai Lama till the 14th Dalai Lama, the successive Dalai Lamas remain the political and as well as the religious leader. So since then, religion and political combined with together, and the Dalai Lama institution become a symbol of unity and a symbol of the sovereignty, and as a symbol of all the Tibetan identity. That is the significance which we may say so. And then particularly since the 13th Dalai Lama, who ruled Tibet for quite a long period of time, comparing with the earlier Dalai Lamas, and during which Tibet was exposed to the international scenario and have two invasions, one from British India, another from China. And by that way, the 13th Dalai Lama become internationally known, and he have established many international relations, and Tibet is come into the light of the international community. And he has also many reforms and developments taking place in Tibet. And as far as the 14th Dalai Lama is concerned, it is very difficult to review or to sum up what has been his contributions. And it was 1952. I was a 14 years old boy, and I received a teaching from the junior tutor of His Holiness, Rinpoche, a long teaching, during which period the Tibetan people also do not know about the real personality of the 14th Dalai Lama. He was also very young at that time. And Rinpoche told us that the present Dalai Lama would be in knowledge as well as in the work, will encompass all the past 13 Dalai Lamas together. And it was difficult to believe how it can be such a vast contribution could be made by one person. And now we realize that it was indeed very true. He did all these things. So in a very brief, we can see how he lead the Tibet as a nation, as a people, in a very, very difficult time. Historically, Tibet never faces this kind of domination, destruction from outsider. And Tibet was invaded by the Communist China at the end of 1949 and 50. And at that time, the Dalai Lama was only 15 or 16 years old. And then the regents realized that they will not be able to lead the nation. And although traditionally the political power would confer when the Dalai Lamas become major at the age of 18. But he was only 16. He was being requested by the Tibetan people to take the charge of the political reign as well. And he was given the political leadership at the age of 15. So negotiation with the Chinese people, conclusion of the 17-point agreement, although it is under duress, but he has played a great role to avoid larger conflict and destruction and killing of people. And thereafter, he visited China in 1954, and he visited India 1956 and 7. And finally, all his efforts to reconcile with China under the 17-point, so-called 17-point agreement, and everything is failed when China is able to transport their military force and equipments, and the repressive measures have been started. And finally, in 1959, his life was in danger. Then he had to escape to India. And after reaching to India, establishment of the Tibetan refugee camps to look after the refugees, more than 80,000 refugees followed after him, and to take care of those refugees, and re-establishment of monasteries and learning centers, and to establishment of schools, and to look after all the welfare of the Tibetan people, and at the same time to preserve and promote the Tibetan culture. So these are very huge amount of work which he have done almost single-handedly with help of the leadership of Government of India, people of India, and he was able to take care of all the refugees, not only the refugees as just to survive, but at the same time to preserve the Tibetan identity, culture, and spiritual heritage. That was a great contribution by him. So to look into his contribution, I cannot elaborate in detail, but I would like to discuss about how he creates his vision, how he make his dream, and how he plans the future. So if you know his a kind of mindset, then you will be able to understand the 14th Dalai Lama and also his significance as well as his contributions. The 14th Dalai Lama's approach to his vision and to his dream always a kind of very, very pragmatism, practical, and based on realism. Mostly the traditional people who are trained in spirituality and tradition, they mostly lives into idealism. They're not able to realize the realistic situation from time to time, and also to go with the change of time, or to make the time according to the need of the people. So these are difficult tasks. So the 14th Dalai Lama has a very unique kind of approach. That is the reason why he encompasses all the past 13 Dalai Lamas. That is his very pragmatic and realistic approach. His reasoning always based on the realities of the past, present, and future. He is not carried away only by the historical facts. He is never carried away by emotional waves. He always looks into the reality of the past, present, and future. And apart from that, he gives more importance the the profound reality of a human mind and human heart. This is a difficult task for any ordinary people. They are always carried away by a kind of force of present situation, and as well as emotions, wave of emotions. And he always look into the reality of the human mind and human heart, combine the human mind and human heart. And by this way, his rationality and his way of analyzing things are based on few very fundamental principles. Among those fundamental principles, the one important is the reality of interdependentness. The interdependentness is a basic principle of the Buddhist philosophy. And in Buddhist philosophy, says everything is arising or came into being or have the existence or recognition interdependently. Nothing can exist independently or without depending to any other thing. So interdependent nature needs to take care of the all surrounding things on which the things are dependent. So the principle of interdependence. And the second fundamental principle was the oneness of all living beings, particularly all human beings. Living beings and human beings are basically same. There's no differentiation. Everyone is seeking pleasure and not happy with the misery. And this is the same. And at the same time, they have the right to seeking pleasure and avoiding the misery. And everyone has the capacity to pursuing happiness and avoiding the unhappiness and misery. So on this basis, all living beings are equal. The equality and oneness of all living beings are the second important principle. Then the third principle is basic nature or basic quality of human beings. All human beings by nature, they have the potential of unconditional love and compassion. If you look as newly born child, is full of love and full of affection, and the human nature is not aggressive or not cruel, but due to circumstances or outsider inflation of emotions, negative emotions, the human beings become at many times cruel. Otherwise, the basic human nature is love and compassion. And then the fourth is universal responsibility. Everyone has a responsibility universally, and which each one has to be performed a universal responsibility. So these four basic principles, the interdependentness, oneness of all living beings, and basic human nature of love and compassion, and the basic nature of human universal responsibility, all his visions and all his efforts and programs are being based on these basic principles. And thereby, he always think that self, his way of taking priority, the others are more important, more priority should giving to the others than the self. The other is more important than self. And the community or the society is more important than the individuals. And the rights are less important, and responsibility and the duties are more important than the rights. And cooperation is more important than competition. So these are basic laws on which he makes his future vision, or makes his brains or dreams or his programs, activities. So these are basic principles or basic foundation on which he always worked, and he always planned, he always dreamed for a future. And therefore, he never conceived the future of people of Tibet as separate from the future of all human creature, all human society. And particularly, he never think of the future or the benefit of the Tibetan people separate from the people of China. And therefore, his way of thinking as equality or oneness of human beings. So he always think of the future visions on the basis of oneness of all human community. And he never think of one side is victory and the other side is a loser. So on these basic principles, he invented and he give us the middle way approach, how to reconcile and how to find a suitable future for the people of Tibet. Not only for the people of Tibet, a future for the people of China, for the people of world, a free world of violence and a free world of competition and a world of oneness and cooperative. So in this basis, he have invented and he have give us the middle way approach to seek the future of the Tibetan people, along with the goodness and the future of the all humanity. So therefore, he always says he have three life commitments. The first is to promote the basic human value, love and compassion, respect to all, and free from violence and conflict. And all problems can be solved through negotiation and understanding each other. So this was his first commitment. And secondly, the spirituality, the religions are very important for many people. And therefore, all the religions are equally sacred and equally important. The religious harmony is second thing to bring a harmonious society among the humanity and religious. And then thirdly, we have only one home to live, that is our small planet Earth. And to preserve this planet Earth, the relationship, interdependent relationship between nature and humanity, or nature and the living creatures, should be harmonious, and therefore take care of the environment and the eco-balance, eco-system. And he is much concerned about this. And then thirdly, to preserve and promote ancient Indian heritage, ancient Indian wisdom, which is preserved in Tibet, and the ancient Tibetan Indian wisdom, because it is beneficial for the future of the entire living creature on this planet Earth. Because in this wisdom, it gives how to dissolve all problems without any conflict and without any violence. And non-violently, he also says that the 20th century was full of violence. The 21st century must be free from violence, a century of violence-free, and a century of dialogue. As long as the living creatures, particularly human society, is there are bound to be some differences and some conflicts. And all these conflicts can never be solved through violence or through struggle. This can be very amicably solved by the love, compassion, and dialogue and understanding and faith to each other. And these things, he talk about the universal responsibility. This is one of his greatest contribution. And secondly, he talk about the universal responsibility. And the third is he talk about the secular ethics. And the fourth is to be friendly with the nature and how to preserve the natural environment. And these things are his globally contribution for the future of the world. And this is now mostly recognized by people. And another most significant thing, which I must mention briefly, is his dialogue with the modern scientific people, modern scientists, the top scientists. For the last almost 40 years, he was regularly engaged to have a dialogue between the Buddhist ancient science and modern scientific knowledge, particularly in the field of science of mind. And in this direction, he has contributed a great deal. And I think in the future, it would be give a tremendous result. After a few centuries, the history will recognize this kind of seeds which he has sown during his lifetime. And the modern scientific knowledge is now realizing that all the traditional wisdom cannot be considered as unscientific knowledge. So the science, modern science, can take many, many benefits and directions from the ancient wisdom, which has been very well established and approved. So these are few things which I would like to just make a point. Of course, you can go into the details elaborately, but I just mentioning just points. So these are few in my mind. These are of the importance, and he has always keep hope, and he always believe that all the humanity can resolve any kind of problem through love and compassion, dialogue and understanding of each other, and in which direction we are looking forward to resolve the Tibet problem, Tibet issue very amicably with the help of all human society, and particularly the people of China. And the present situation cannot remain all tends to come, and the all things are transitory. All composed things are transitory. This is also a philosophical point. So therefore, everything will never be remain unchanged. So therefore, we are looking for an amicable resolution of Tibet issue, and the problem of Tibet people can be solved, and the future of the Tibetan people, the interest of the future of Tibetan people cannot be separated from the interest and from the goodness of all living beings or all human beings. Now the third question about the next Dalai Lama, who will choose. The Communist China repeatedly tells that the choosing and recognition of the next Dalai Lama is exclusive prerogative of the central government, and I don't think this is a kind of ridiculous thing. We need not to bother about it, what the China makes claim, and it is not worth to discuss or to consider. The first question is, what does it mean the central government will decide? Does the central government of China, which claims to be a communist or Marxist, do believe into the continuation of consciousness, birth after death? It is true. They believe it is true. If they believe that human consciousness does not come to an end during the time of death, and it will have another birth thereafter. If they believe in this, then they should not talk about the dialectic materialism. And the dialectical materialism is basically based on the principle of the mind is the quality of the matter. And when the matter ceases, the mind also ceases. And after death, there's no continuation of consciousness. And they have to change this. If they do not believe this principle, they do not believe birth after death, they continue to consciousness, then the recognition of the Dalai Lama is just hypocritic for political reasons or for any other reason. They invited about this, and they are talking about the tradition or the past. There's no tradition and no past. Of course, during the 18th century, when Tibetans have a close relationship with the Manchu Empire in Central China, and at many times they have to seek support from them. And at that time, they have suggested 29 points how to improve the efficient work of the Tibet government, and in which they also suggested the Dalai Lamas and Panchen Lamas are recognized through the lottery from the golden vessel. And even after that suggestion, the 9th and the 10th and 11th and 13th, 14th, all these come thereafter. So the 9th was not, the 13th and 14th was not, only the 12th, 11th and 12th was come through the golden vessel. That also, not only golden vessel, it has combined with religious rituals. And there's no such tradition, there's no such role, there's no such past heritage. The Dalai Lamas must be recognized through this. Even they do it so, it has no value. And their own experience, they have done it with the present Panchen Lama. And what is solved, the purpose of that. So this is very ridiculous. So I never react when China says like this. And they may do so, but they will have no purpose. There will be no recognition. No people of Tibet, no people of the world would recognize it, would believe it. So therefore, we need not worry what the Chinese government is repeatedly saying, because they have some kind of fear in their mind. They have some uncertainty in their mind. So therefore, to take care of these uncertainties and their fear, they are talking about this. And it need not to be reacted. It need not to be take note of it. So therefore, I just ignore what the Chinese government say. So my time is up. So I will stop here my talking, and I apologize for the poor presentation due to the limitation of language and other things. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Rinpoche. The way you have explained the history of Tibet and the institution of Dalai Lama. When you reached up to the point, the philosophy of present Dalai Lama, many of us, we were worried that you may not be touching this, the real issue we are talking about, the reincarnation. But in a very few words, that way you have, if I can define it, the way you have dismantled the basic idea of identifying reincarnation by China, that explains so many things, especially from the spiritual side and the religious side. And now we have a speaker who has a very deep understanding of the whole issue from political side. And we have Mr. Robert DESTRO, as I explained already, one of the most prominent legal luminaries of United States of America, and a person who has very deep understanding of Tibetan situation, the Chinese approach, and how at least America is going to deal with this issue. He and his colleagues a few months ago had put it beautifully on paper in the law book. So, Mr. Robert DESTRO, the stage is for you, and we would love to hear from you about China's claims of reinstalling or installing a Dalai Lama of their choice. Sir.
Well, good day, and warm greetings to everyone around the world who is listening today. I want to start by extending my congratulations to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, on the occasion of his birthday. I am deeply honored and privileged to join you for this special occasion. I also extend my best wishes and those of my family to all of you, and assure all of you that we are praying for His Holiness and for the continued vitality of the Tibetan community worldwide. Now, my thoughts this morning are going to focus not only on His Holiness teaching, but also on the role that the Tibetan community around the world has to play in all of this. So let me start by His Holiness's teachings. And by his teachings and by his example, his life's work has been to encourage respect and harmony among the followers of the world's religions. And he has urged the world to cultivate what he calls the human values of compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline. All of us know from experience that the daily cultivation of each of these human values would make the world a far more hospitable place in which to live and to raise our children. We also know that the daily violation and ignorance of these values makes it sometimes a far more difficult place in which to live. So throughout his long and exemplary life, the Dalai Lama has become, just as much for the world as for the Tibetan people, the very personification of Tibet as a place, a people, and a culture that's shaped by its language and the Tibetan Buddhist faith. So with all the world on the occasion of his birthday, we pray that he continues to lead a vibrant and healthy life for many more years. And with the vast majority of the world, we encourage and pray that the Tibetan community will rise to the significant challenges it faces as it attempts to follow in his footsteps. And so with the short time I have left, I want to address the remainder of my comments to the Tibetan community at large, which has worked so hard to preserve the language and culture and faith that makes Tibetans and Tibetan culture unique. Yours is a critical mission. As all of you know far better than I do, Tibet is far more than a place. It's a unique environment that has shaped the culture and outlook of its people for generations. It is the source of incredible physical beauty, the source of great rivers on which the livelihood and lives of many millions depend. It's a jewel, treasured by all who know of its natural beauty, its culture, and the passion of its people. Its future and the world's understanding of Tibet is in your hands. His Holiness is, as all of us so deeply appreciate, far more than a spiritual leader. His voice and his thoughts on the right order of things and on the future of the Tibetan people set the tone, not only for this celebration of his life and his teachings, but also for our thinking about the future of the Tibetan people. Let us consider, then, the human dimension of the challenges facing the Tibetan community worldwide. And I do so in keeping with the request by our moderator that we address the questions of reincarnation, and I will do that shortly. I can't emphasize enough the importance of our common humanity in this discussion. As an American, I firmly believe that the words of our founders, written in the Declaration of Independence, express a universal truth, that it is, quote, self-evident that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, unquote. These truths don't depend on culture. They don't depend on the whim of a party, a government official, of any majority, temporary or permanent. They belong to each of us as members of the human family. And as a Catholic Christian, I firmly believe as well that each of us, as a human being, is called to a unique mission by our Creator, who has endowed each one of us with unique gifts, with a unique history, and with a unique vocation to be of service to our families, our communities, and our respective nations. This is the human dimension of human rights that's so often lost in our sometimes acrimonious arguments about the right order of things in society, about the priority of the individual versus the collective, and about the right of every individual and community to preserve and develop the unique gifts that has been conferred on each of us by our Creator. His Holiness's middle way approach to preserving the unique nature of Tibet and the freedom of the Tibetan people as a unique community within the People's Republic of China is a case in point. The middle way approach requires active engagement with each of the human values he identified. Every society that hopes to survive in the long term must exemplify and rest upon those values. His Holiness's own life and experience show first and foremost the importance of self-discipline and the need to recognize that when there is a great disparity of power, as there is between the People's Republic of China and the Tibetan people, peaceful alternatives must be sought without conceding an inch to the pride and vanity of others. Given our commitment to preserving that which makes us unique as individuals and communities, the Tibetan community must find not only the strength to tolerate the arrogance of those who would enslave them and the rest of us, but also the compassion to devise a strategy of resistance and self-preservation that acknowledges the humanity of the oppressor and insecurities that come with our common humanity. Only then can we find the strength to forgive and to set ourselves free to embark on that middle way toward the preservation of the language, culture, and religion that makes Tibet and Tibetans uniquely suited to following the middle way approach His Holiness has set out for all of us. We celebrate His Holiness's 86th birthday with the knowledge that the Chinese Communist Party has claimed the right to control, by force, as they did in the case of the Panchen Lama, the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. Just as they have done in the case of the Catholic Church in China, in the case of Hong Kong, in the case of the Uyghur people of Xinjiang, and the Mongolian people. They will seek to impose their materialism and communist ideology to eliminate that which makes each of these communities unique. Their uniqueness is the threat, and the Chinese Communist Party will ruthlessly seek to subsume it in the collective materialism and uniformity that President Xi Jinping has described as communism, quote, with Chinese characteristics, unquote. All of us know that Tibetan Buddhism with Chinese characteristics is not Tibetan Buddhism, nor can a person identified by the Chinese Communist Party ever be the real Dalai Lama. We have seen with our own eyes the genocide with Chinese characteristics of the Chinese Communist Party against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang, and its campaigns against Mongolian people and all others who struggle to build their lives, their futures, and communities on the gifts that make them unique. On this, the 86th anniversary of the birth of His Holiness, we should commit ourselves to preserve that which makes each of us unique and that which makes the community of Tibetans unique. We must work together to preserve a community of Tibetans worldwide that maintain their unique Tibetan characteristics. This, I humbly submit to you, is the middle way, and it is for you, with the support of all of us, to walk it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you. This was a very interesting way of looking at middle way, which many of us, at least a person like me, who has been in touch with Tibet very actively for almost 50 years, we didn't have that way of looking at middle way, the way you have. It's really wonderful, a very new concept of middle way, that you can have middle way only when you have equality and respect for equality for everybody. And the way you explained Mr. Xi Jinping's insistence on what you call spirituality or Buddhism with the socialist, based on their socialist values, and you say that if Tibetan Buddhism is that way, it doesn't remain Tibetan Buddhism. So that explains itself. The hollowness of what Mr. Xi Jinping is today trying to thrust upon the people of Tibet. And when you say that when there is a total imbalance of power between two sides, then dialogue is the best way. But Mr. Xi Jinping doesn't believe in that. And he has announced about the next reincarnation of Dalai Lama of his choice. So many times, some of our friends, they try to advise Mr. Xi Jinping, if you really believe in reincarnation through either the Golden Urn or through the Communist Party of China, please do it on Mao Zedong. Please do it on Deng Xiaoping. Yeah, you will have a new Mao Zedong. You will have another Deng Xiaoping, and plus Mr. Xi will make it a wonderful communist party, and China will be far more stronger than what you think. Thank you very much for this perspective. And now we will be opening for questions. And one thing, what I'm seeing from the chat box, it's a great tribute to the two speakers. I find what my friend Tenzin Thai, who is very well experienced in dealing with the Chinese internet and those attacks, he says that he is watching a very heavy activity of what he calls 50 penny force. 50 cent digital army of who has been quite active on our chat box, putting same questions from more than 100 people, copy paste. But that shows that's a tribute to the success of our two speakers. But now may I request Professor Ayushi Keitkar, professor from Jawaharlal Nehru University, expert in international relations and a very active senior member of CHASE, who has been actively working with us during such webinars. This is the fourth in that series. Ayushi, I request you to please come out with those questions which you have taken note of, and we will request our both speakers to kindly attend to these questions. Ayushi, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. After that very engaging discussion, it's anything but natural that we would have these kind of comments, especially when we are live streaming. But we've had a set of very interesting questions coming, even despite the disturbance that has happened here through the various social media forums of Chase and the Tibetan Youth Congress. So some of the questions, I'm just putting it across, and both the experts kindly comment on it. They are about 12 questions, so I'll give it in lots of 3. Some of the questions are overlapping, so probably both the speakers can take these questions in one go. So to begin with, let me start. Most of the people have wished a long and healthy life for His Holiness Dalai Lama, but they sincerely want to return back to their homeland, to Tibet. And they're asking questions about how is this possible, and if the Dalai Lama can make it happen in his lifetime, because that's what is their ardent wish. So this is a question that keeps appearing many times on all our forums. The second question is, and this probably is a little controversial question, but it's nonetheless interesting, and I'm sure a lot of our audience would actually seek answer for this question, and that is, what is the possibility of a non-Tibetan Dalai Lama? So here, our viewers are looking at the possibility as well as the repercussions of such a thing happening. So probably these 2 questions, and then we can go about with some more. Or do you want all the questions asked in one go? What would you prefer?
No. I think it will be better in. We have about half an hour, so okay. we go by subject wise.
Sure.
So we leave these questions open to both of you, Professor Rinpoche and Mr. DESTRO.
Well, could you, Professor, could you repeat the second question?
Yes, quickly, I'll repeat both the questions. The first question is the possibility of returning back to Tibet in the lifetime of the present Dalai Lama, first. And the second is the possibilities and the repercussions of having a non-Tibetan Dalai Lama.
Professor, do you want to go first?
I will follow you.
Well, I think the question, is it possible to return in the Dalai Lama's lifetime, is part of that disparity of power question we were talking about earlier. I mean, it is always possible, for individuals to return, even if they have to sneak in, but the idea that the Chinese Communist Party, would allow that kind of a return, would represent, at least I think in their minds, a return to a unique Tibet, to Tibet as it always was. And that, I think, is profoundly threatening to them. So I will turn to the good professor, His Excellency, and see what he thinks on that question.
His Holiness do not consider his return is very important, but he always consider that the freedom, necessary freedom to the Tibetan people to lead their own unique lifestyle and to preserve their cultural heritage is more important. When you talk about possibility, the things are impermanent and always keep changing. And particularly in the international political scenario, the changes are come unexpectedly. So we cannot say that it is not possible to return His Holiness back to Tibet with all dignity during his lifetime. He still very much willing to live a much long time and not less than 113 years of age. And in that way, and it is always a possibility, always be there of his return. And what was the second? Yes, of course, the Dalai Lamas are not necessary to be Tibetan native in nationality or in race. Any part of the world, the Dalai Lama can take birth, and that will not make any controversial as far as the next Dalai Lama is really choosing through in accordance with the spiritual traditions. Then he can born anywhere, and there's no question of nationality or ethnicity.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that makes it clear. Yeah.
All right. Now the next question, we have 3-4 questions which ask about it's like materialism versus spiritualism. So in this race, especially with China giving a lot of good options to people, there's one comment that says Tibetan youth who grew up overseas cannot understand the happiness of new Tibetan youth in China. So these kind of comments are coming. I mean, there were about 7 to 8 such comments. So probably I request the speakers to comment on whether Tibetans are actually moved by or tempted by Chinese materialism versus their own spiritualism. So in this race between materialism and spiritualism, do you think the Tibetan cause is lost or is diluted? So probably you can answer that, sir. And the second question is, if not dialogue, then what? Since both the speakers have insisted, and it's a true Tibetan tradition of dialogue to resolve differences and conflict, but since China doesn't believe in dialogue, so there is this possibility where a lot of our audience want to know, if not dialogue, then what? So probably you can take these 2 questions now, sir.
Well, let me begin with the question of materialism versus spiritualism. I mean, materialism is the religion of China, and there's no question about that. When I have spoken with Chinese friends in both the business and the academic community, when you ask them, what is it that you believe in, the answer is money. So in effect, money has become God, and the pursuit of materialism is the spiritualism of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, that's not to say that the same thing isn't true in the West. I mean, that there is no question, and I think in one of the Christian Gospels, a very wealthy man asked Jesus of Nazareth, what must I do, to attain the kingdom of heaven? And he says, I have followed the laws. I have done everything that I have supposed to do. And Jesus says to him, well, then go and sell all your goods and give to the poor, and then come back and you'll be a little closer. So the idea of, is it possible to be a wealthy person? Is it possible to be an educated person and still be spiritual? Of course it is. But we have to understand that the God of materialism is yourself. The people who are truly materialistic worship their own success, and they are not plugged into anything outside themselves. And so I think that the truth is that if we go back to the teachings of His Holiness about compassion, about generosity, about self-control, that's where that spiritualism develops. And so I will turn to my colleague, the professor, and see what he has to say on this question.
I do not understood very clearly what was the real question. The happiness of the Tibetan younger generation inside Tibet, how they are happy and how they are not happy, it cannot be judged from outside. It shall have to be studied with them and closely researched how the people who born and brought up under the communist regime, they have their own terminology, born and brought up under the red flag, and how their mental attitude and how they have contentment and happiness in their mind. They shall have to be understood. Materialism and spiritualism, we may think it against each other, and sometimes we may also think it supplementary to each other. That is the way the people have to look at. If the materialism can substitute the spiritualism, then by this time the spiritualism should have been completely disappeared from the surface of the earth. It hasn't happened. The materialism have not able to fulfill all human inspirations. If materialism is able to fulfill all the human expression, then the spirituality and the religious traditions should be disappeared, and that does not happen. And the materialism, spiritualism, both cannot be enforced by power or by force to any human mind. The human mind has a certain freedom to choose either of this, and therefore I do not see these two kind of contradictory to each other.
Thank you, sir. And so what about the question? If not dialogue, then what?
To wait. In the history of a national problem, 1 century, 2 centuries is not a long period of time. And the dialogue, the Chinese leadership does not have any intention or any willingness to come to dialogue table. This is true as of today, and it will not remain consistently true all times to come. And if you look these 60 years of the past, the China has seen a lot of changes. The different regions has a different way of approach. And at this moment, it appears to be the present president's rule is a kind of sustainable, consistent, it will remain all the times to come. Then, of course, there will be not room for dialogue. But as the change takes place all over the world, the China will also have to see natural and by way of law of nature, the change will come. And then there will be either some different approach other than dialogue, or the situation will become suitable for dialogue. So we have to wait.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Robert, sir, do you have to say anything on this?
Yes, I think that the professor is exactly correct. I mean, there is, given the disparity of power, the important piece, as my wife often reminds me, that when you get on an airplane, the first thing they tell you is put your own face mask on first, and then help the people around you. And here, this is the same situation. And the important task facing the Tibetan community worldwide is to look forward, is to plan for the future, and whether that future is 10 years or 100 years, it's the duty of the current community to preserve that which makes it unique. The Dalai Lama's calling from the time of his reincarnation to the time he passes on is to be the current leader of the community, The community now needs to discuss the question of what comes after. And the Chinese can't pick that community. The international community can't pick that leader. You must choose your own leader. And how you do that is one that demands close consultation and dialogue within your own community.
Thank you, sir. Last set of questions, two very interesting questions that have come in. One is, when Tibetans are not guaranteed even right to life, then the question of this entire debate about human rights, especially coming from the Western front, this becomes very meaningless and hollow. So would you like to comment on that? And second, what is the role of India and US in ensuring the sanctity of the institution of the Dalai Lama? So these are the last two questions.
Well, I think that the first question is really quite a profound one. And I skipped over most of that discussion as in my capacity as Assistant Secretary, we were continually engaged in this discussion about the nature of human rights. And you are absolutely correct that when you cannot even depend on the right to life itself, we know it's been well known for years that the Chinese Communist Party has made a fortune on compelled organ harvesting. That this is and my question has always been, how do you possibly have dialogue, with somebody who would sell your liver? I mean, this is something that it's very hard to get your head around, but that was why I made my reflection on the human values that His Holiness has been teaching for all these years. And so my question is, you have to go into any such discussions with your eyes wide open. It's not going to get better and for quite a long time. And the role of India and the US, and I'll just be very brief on that. I want to make a slight correction that the Tibet Policy Act has been introduced, but it's not been actually put into law yet. It's something that we need to do. But in a discussion that I have had with many colleagues around the world, when they ask me almost on a constant basis, what is the United States policy toward my country? My question is always a question back, which is, what is it that you want the United States and India to have their policy be? And in a democracy like India and in a democracy like the United States, that itself is a question of intense debate. It's a question about practical reason. And it's also a question about what's possible in a multi-party democracy. So these are questions that we need to continue. And it's one that I wouldn't be here if I weren't interested in engaging in the future.
Yes, Professor.
I have nothing to add, but I would say, yes, the human right as conceived in the Western tradition, there's no room to discuss it in China because they do not believe any kind of right. They think every right can be taken away or can be denied, but there are certain natural rights which cannot be taken away by any kind of force or power that China is realizing now. In spite of all kind of threat to life, threat to everything, but yet the mindset of the Tibetan people, not only the old people, even the younger generation who born and brought up within the communist region, the mindset, their hope, their belief, particularly their devotion to the present Dalai Lama, it was never been able to take away by any kind of force. In spite of threatening to the life, it was not able to change the mindset of the Tibetan people. That means that there are certain rights which are not be denied by external force. And secondly, what His Holiness believes, what we believe is we should pay more attention to our responsibility instead of the rights. If we perform our universal responsibility in the right way, then that responsibility, the performance of responsibility will bring the rights into a right perspective. And then it will become a kind of entity which cannot be denied by any external force. And for that, the Gandhian way, tolerating and forgiving all kind of atrocities, and yet keep the mind in a kind of unconditional, compassionate, then a stage will come. No rights can be denied. No real natural rights can be denied. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, both of you. Over to you, Vijay sir.
Yeah, thank you. It was really a very interesting question hour session, and we could attend to many of those aspects which were not exactly part of our the topic of the day, but the topic would have been incomplete without these aspects and these questions. So I'm very thankful to both of you, Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche and Mr. Robert DESTRO, for not only for your enlightening speeches, but the answers. And now we are reaching the conclusion of this session. And moreover, I had promised in the morning to Mr. Robert DESTRO, because you have engagements immediately after that in Washington, D.C. So we'll ensure that we conclude the session in time. So now I leave the floor to our very active friend, a very dedicated friend, Gompo Dhundupji. Gompo Dhundupla is the president of Tibetan Youth Congress, which is the largest organization of Tibetan diaspora. Even among the community, which is a little more than 150,000, this organization has 30,000 members, which makes it a really a powerful and influential organization. And many times we have seen that the government of China has been specifically targeting Tibetan Youth Congress in spite of their total dedication. I repeat the word total dedication to non-violence. They have been giving them all bad names. But that is, I think that's a tribute from China to Tibetan Youth Congress. So now we come for vote of thanks from Mr. Gompo Dhundup. Yes, please.
Am I audible now? Okay.
Yes.
Tashidile and greetings to all. So firstly, on this very auspicious occasion of 86th birthday of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, I, on behalf of Tibetan Youth Congress, would like to extend our warmest greetings and the happiest birthday to His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and we wishes and the prayer for fulfillment of his all auspicious commitment and return to the free Tibet. So today on this very special occasion, firstly I would like to thank His Eminence the Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche for blessing this important event. So as our moderator have already given the introduction of SAMDHONG Rinpoche, and all the audience don't need the introduction of the SAMDHONG Rinpoche, and we as a Tibetan Youth Congress very much proud that the SAMDHONG Rinpoche was among the first Central Executive Committee of Tibetan Youth Congress. So with the grace of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and with the contribution for the older generation of the Central Executive Member of Tibetan Youth Congress, and all the active members in the regional community, Tibetan Youth Congress currently have 88 active chapters globally working for the just cause of Tibet. So I thank you, Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche, for blessing this event and giving the in-depth information on this important topic. Secondly, I want to thank respected Mr. Robert DESTRO for your constant support for the Tibet Just Cause. We are very much indebted and thankful for your immense contribution in passing the Tibet Policy and Support Act into the law, and for your in-depth information on this very important session. Thank you, Mr. DESTRO. And the third, I want to thank the moderator of the event and the co-host organizer of this important program, Mr. Vijay Krantiji. He is currently the director of CHESS, the Center for Himalayan Asian Studies and Engagement. And Mr. Vijay Kranti is a long-time friend of Tibet, and he is working closely and supporting the Tibetan Youth Congress for almost now 4 or 5 decades. Thank you very much, Mr. Vijay Kranti, for working actively to make this event a very successful one. Thank you very much. And next, I would like to thank Tibet Action Institute and particularly Tenzin Thaila for your timely, the kind of media digital support that you are extending for our organization and the joint program that we are organizing with the CHESS. Thank you very much, Thaila, and all the office barriers of Tibet Action Institute. Third, I want to thank Professor Anjali Mishraji for handling this Q&A session very intelligently, and also Professor have contributed her skill in editing and composing the video that we have broadcast earlier. Thank you very much, Professor. And also our journalist friends is here with us. And lastly, I would like to thank all the audience who have joined this important historic event virtually. And thank you very much. And I want to conclude this session with a long-lived prayer to His Holiness Dalai Lama, and again extend my best wishes and the happiest birthday to His Holiness. Thank you very much all. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Just small correction. Anjali Mishra is not a professor. She is a very energetic student of journalism and a very active volunteer with the CHESS, who has so many talents with her, and which helps us every time when we organize our events. So thank you, sir. We all are indebted to Professor SAMDHONG Rinpoche, Mr. Robert DESTRO, and very specially Mr. Robert DESTRO, because I know it was early morning. You had to, it's not that you are here at 8, you arrived much earlier and you had to get ready for it. And then you have a full day to go ahead, and you took so much time for us. So thank you. And I'm sure very soon we will come out with another subject on this platform, which is a common platform of Center for Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement and Tibetan Youth Congress. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ayush.
Thank you
Ayush.